Hey guys, what's up? How you doing? Today is part 2 of the ice staff in real life series. I didn't plan on making a part 2 until I actually could print a piece, but it's taking longer than expected to get the pieces I need. My last video about this got a ton of views, well, for my small channel, despite its terrible quality. I mentioned in a different video somewhere along the way that the reason for that was the default settings on the free video editing software I use was turned all the way down, and I, being super new, didn't even review the video before I posted it, and I apologize for that. But I wanted to post another video that more accurately shows off what I'm making. If you're interested in seeing the progress, then make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. As for the printer status, I'm still waiting on some parts to arrive from China. It sucks, but there's no one to blame, and everything's just slow because of COVID, so it's just something we have to deal with. So let's get into things. I'm going to go through piece by piece, but not necessarily in the order that I plan to print things. So if you don't really care about each component, just skip to near the end of the video to check out the full staff in HD. First is the segments figure, the part of the staff you use to revive people once it's upgraded. This was one of the more complex parts to make because of all the curves. You can see that it's hollow, as are all the pieces, so they can be put on an aluminum rod. But this one is left open on the bottom to possibly put a white light in. As I'm sure you know if you've played Origins, a white light comes from the segments figure when you use it, so that's what that's for. The top here has two pegs that fit into the bottom of the next piece to keep the piece from spinning around on the aluminum rod. The aluminum rod is there for support because a bunch of plastic pieces held together by nothing but small pegs wouldn't exactly stay together, so that's what that's for. Next is the bottom handle, another complex part due to the shape of it. And again, you can see the pegs on the top. I've seen a few other ice staff models out there online, but I really do think mine is the best, and this is one of the parts that separates mine from the rest. Other models I see don't have this concave curve along the handle that mine does. It's just something that's a little more complex to make, and with my skills I was able to get it right. Enough bragging though, this cylinder off to the side will have wire coming out from it as the real staff does. I'll see if I can find a picture of that. I know I have one saved, but... Next is a pretty simple part, just the main rod section of the staff. This one is the longest part and really pushes the printer to its limit. The only part of this that's more complex is the nut here, but everything else is pretty simple. Everything on the staff is exactly as it is in game, though there are some variations between the models when the player is holding it versus when it's on the pedestal, versus when you're actually holding it in your hand in first person. I always went with the version I thought looked best though. Next is another part of the long shaft. It has a similar pattern to the lower one, and also a nut, but you can see that it's slightly different, specifically the silver rings. But that's really about it. Again, you can see that these pieces are hollow, and you can see through the entire thing. What we're at now is about halfway through the staff, maybe a little bit more. Next is this weird looking blue cage part. In the game this part does glow, but the one I've made isn't really equipped for that, though I may try to do something better in a later version, we'll see. Another thing that I haven't done yet that I may try to do later is make the trigger able to move. As you can see right now, it's just attached to the side, whereas in the game you can squeeze it to reload. That reload animation is super complex though, so my staff won't actually be able to do that. But none of the others can either, so I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. Next is this weird part. I don't even know what to call it, it's just kind of strange looking. This part, like I mentioned earlier, has a crazy reload animation, but mine can't do that, as it would be really mechanically complex. And probably require some metal gears, honestly, which I don't have. This keeps the silver lines that go up to the side and has holes here for LED lights because in-game this part does glow, and I'd like to make it glow on the real model. I left the inside pretty open so that I can have room to put LED lights and wires. Next is this cage part. These dark rods are thicker than they are in-game, but since this is made of plastic and not metal like the real one would be, they need to be thicker so they don't break. This part was also pretty complex to make because of the convex circular plates, as well as this black thing in the middle. This is another thing that kind of separates mine from other ones. The detail here with the curves is far greater in mine than other ones that I've seen, and that's why I'm so proud of this one. Next is another super complex part. I'm not really sure what it's called, so I end up giving parts weird names, like I named this one the top 6 thing part. Not great, but this is another part which I have a lot more detail than other models I've seen. And this one was actually, it wasn't that difficult to make, to be honest, because you could just make one individual section here and then spin it 6 times around the central axis. You can see here that there aren't actually pegs here, and this is because the piece above it has pegs facing down, because the next piece wouldn't really work to have holes in it, as you'll see in a second. Next is the part that will hold the blades. This is a single piece, and again, the attention to detail here is great. If you notice, 2 of the arms are different from the others, as they are in-game. The huge open part here is for a battery pack. I plan to use a AAA battery pack, but I may be able to use something smaller depending on the number of LEDs I end up using. Next is the section of the arm. I made the bottom part of the arm here so that this part isn't able to rotate at all. I also have these nuts and bolts here, though not actually nuts and bolts, just something I'm going to glue in place. I could have made this all one piece, but the way the printer works would have made it so that they turned out lower in quality, so I wanted to make it multiple pieces. Next we have the basic fangs. On the eye staff there are 4 fangs, but 2 are different from the other 2. This one is the simpler version. Each fang is different, so that the print quality will be highest, specifically on the indent here, because of the way the printer moves. Again, we have nuts and bolts that will be glued on to hold the fangs in place. Next is the complex fang. It's really not that much more complex, I just call it that because it has some extra stuff. It's super similar to the simple fang, but just has this part that juts out from the bottom. These are held on by the same nuts and bolts. One thing that I want to point out is this little rectangular prism right here, and I'll show you what that does in a second. So next is the blades. Pretty simple, just the same blade on all 4 fangs. These blades start in when you build the staff, and those rectangles I pointed out earlier keep the blades from folding in too far. Once you upgrade the staff, the blades are unfolded, and there's part on the arm that I mentioned earlier that keeps the blades from unfolding too far. Finally is the crystal. This goes on top of the plate that covers the battery box. I want to print this out of some kind of clear material so I can put blue lights in it, so we'll have to see if I can get my hands on something like that. Clear materials are a little bit harder to get your hands on when 3D printing, and they're a lot more expensive too, so I'll need something else to justify actually printing out of it, or maybe I'll just use a 3D print shop nearby. This right here is the full staff. As I mentioned earlier, different models in game have different proportions, and the height of the staff is based on the model you see when another player is holding it, as this is the best way to gauge how long it actually is. The entire staff is about 6 feet in height, so it's life size, which is why it will take so long to print and why it's in so many pieces. But that's all for this video. I just wanted to better show off what's coming, so if you want to keep up with the progress, then make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. But until next time, that's GG.